Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen, to What If Deku Had Deadpool's powers. Now, what are you talking about? This is my channel. Wait, so you're saying it's not? And I'm making a fool out of myself by saying this out loud? Oh.
The story begins at Izuku being 7 years old and severely ill in the hospital. The doctors don't actually understand what is going on with him. However, Izuku's not getting more sick than he already is, but he isn't getting better either. It's like his body's in a state of like constant flux that balances itself out almost. Doctors think it may be a quirk effect saving his life. And when it comes for the doctor to actually check this fact, they're really confused. They genuinely do not understand what is occurring. That's when Izuku looks over and looks at us saying, "Have you read the Deadpool comics?" The doctors ask, "Who are you talking to?" But he says, "I'm not talking to anyone." But that's when they do some more tests and they realize something insane about Izuku. That his entire body is just filled with cancer cells. However, every time a cell dies, it gets replaced with more cancer cells. However, it isn't ruining his physical appearance in this timeline. I don't really want to do that. I think that'd be a little boring-ish. But he looks normal. He's just constantly sick, basically. And it's just not allowing Izuku to die. The doctors are actually calling this Izuku's quirk the dying factor. Because it's just replacing every cell in his body with cancerous ones on repeat. But it's not allowing him to die because every time a cancerous cell dies, it gets replaced with a new cancerous cell. And they actually realized and mentioned to Inko that it's possible that Izuku might be immortal due to his quirk. And honestly, Izuku's really sad about this. Because that means eventually her Izuku will be alone. There's no way for him to, keep everyone around with him forever. And they also mentioned that they believe that this dying factor is actually what his quirk is. His quirk is the regenerating cancer cells. And they think it's really sad. His quirk is just a dying factor. Inko is even more shocked knowing that there's nothing the doctors can actually do for Izuku, and she just takes him home. As I said prior, this is a side note, Izuku does look normal. Outside looks fine. His insides look dead. Not insane yet. Izuku ends up informing his class about what his quirk is. However, it ends up with a mixed reaction. Some think he's weird while others think he's awesome. And Bakugo actually kind of respects Izuku in this timeline because his best friend's quirk is immortality. That's called the dying factor. How cool is that? Anyways, we'll time skip, but I do want to note that during the years, he's gotten several injuries, such as heel. There was actually a point where he got his hand caught in a conveyor, like at the grocery store, and he actually lost the hand, and it grew back in the matter of a few days. And that's when they realized that it was more than just immortality. He heals super fast, too, due to all of his cells being immediately replaced. And so, Inko is still scared to knowing what Izuku's future entails, but everybody else, including Izuku, is kind of like, this is awesome. Izuku, being in his constant state of sickness, eventually got used to it, and it just doesn't bother him anymore. So he just moves on from it and just lives his life like normal. Eventually, we get to, the being 14, the teacher going, "Here's a career aptitude test." And then he throws it away going, "I know you all want to be heroes!" And then goes on to yap about everybody's business. Yeah, I thought that was kind of annoying. Why would you yap about a bunch of your students' business? It's none of their business. But Anyways, he then mentions that Izuku and Bakugo plan on both going to UA. And that's when Izuku and Bakugo both fist bump. And the class does still remain divided till this day because Izuku is constantly dying. It's like a weird quirk, and others are like, Izuku is super fucking awesome. But either way, they do end up deciding to go to UA together. And that's when they're going underneath the bridge, and Izuku ends up getting caught by the sludge villain, but Bakugo doesn't. But there's nothing Bakugo can do. He tries to explode at the sludge villain and everything, but it just didn't cause anything. And eventually, Izuku does suffocate. But he doesn't actually die, because he can't die, right? So, even though Izuku is suffocated, when All Might saves him, He's perfectly fine. And All Might's kind of like, huh? How's this possible? And that's when Bakugo actually explains for Izuku, because Izuku's still like catching his breath, basically. And Bakugo's like, he can't die. And All Might's like, what? Fascinating. And so All Might actually is kind of interested in this, but he ends up just signing their books and continuing on. That's when Izuku and Bakugo actually end up splitting ways. Bakugo heads towards the city, Izuku heads towards his home. But that's when, like 5 minutes later, he actually hears like a bunch of commotion. He runs towards the city, like kind of curious about what's going on. And that's when he notices the sludge villains escape, and there's a bunch of explosions. And that's when he realizes it's Bakugo. Bakugo got caught by a sludge villain, and Izuku's like, how could All Might? And Izuku's just like, it doesn't matter. And he just immediately sprints in, you know, like Canon Izuku goes to try and save Bakugo, but he doesn't have any sort of super strength or anything like that, so there's nothing he could really do for Bakugo. Eventually, you know, Bakugo gets saved by All Might because the sludge villain is trying to fight off Izuku and take over Bakugo's body, and All Might, realizing how heroic Izuku is, saves them. You know, and things remain relatively canon up until when All Might actually stops Izuku and offers him his quirk, like in canon. And All Might points out that he's like, you're immortal, which means you would be the final wielder unless you eventually decide to give this quirk away. But the one thing, the biggest reason why I'm giving Izuku One for All is a secret. So anyways, Izuku then goes on to train with All Might for the next 10 months, and he actually asks All Might if Bakugo can train with them, and All Might agrees. All Might originally was very hesitant, but Izuku explained to All Might, Bakugo is his best friend, and he's going to tell Bakugo about it anyway. I'd also like to point out that All Might kind of just gave Izuku the hair like 4 months in, because Izuku wasn't like tiny either. Like, he was decently built, but it only took a few months for him to get built enough to actually withstand One for All's power. And with him being immortal, it doesn't really matter anyway, but All Might didn't want him to explode regardless. And so the training continues for the rest of the time skip, and Bakugo, Izuku, All Might, they're all training. All Might really training Izuku and Bakugo, but it's the same thing in the end. So after the 10-month training arc, they then go to UA's entrance exams. And these exams are honestly great for them, because even though they're not put together, that 10 months of training has made Bakugo significantly stronger than he was in canon, and Izuku as well. Like, by the point this training is over, Izuku, I would say, is able to use, like, 45 to 50% without any, you know, pushback. And since it doesn't really matter if he breaks his body, he can use 100%. Just, he doesn't really want to feel that pain 24/7 every time, if that makes sense. And so Izuku, he mainly uses like 45 to 50%. Izuku doesn't mutter like he did in canon, stuff like that. Like the canonical stuff where Ida starts tweaking out at everybody. President Mike shuts him down, and then it's basically like that. And so then we skip to Izuku being at the gate for the UA entrance exams, and he's trying to go over to Uraraka because she looks extremely nervous and he wants to comfort her. However, you know, Ida has to be on his high horse, you know, telling Izuku, oh yeah, you can't go distract that girl since you can't do it anything on your own. Bruh. Fuck Ida. Honestly, fuck that guy. Side rant, he is so annoying, bro. I don't care what anybody says. I wish Stain had stabbed him with that sword, bro. I fucking wish. Anyways, continuing. After Izuku ignores Ida and just goes over to Uraraka, tries to comfort her, yo, this is just an exam. I'm sure you'll do great. I believe in you, you know? Kind of helping Uraraka relax a little bit. Izuku, as soon as the doors open, toggles not even the full 45 to 50% he can use without any drawbacks. He just takes it like 10%, and he's like keeping up with Ida. And he's just gone, bro. He starts boxing up all the robots, destroying them one by one, wombo comboing them. And honestly, he does pretty well for himself. Eventually, we get towards the end where, you know, the 0-pointer comes out, and Izuku's just like, I don't need to fight that. So he's walking back because he doesn't feel a need to run either. And that's when he hears Uraraka screaming for help. much like in canon, and he immediately turns around, uses 45%, runs straight back, takes off the rubble, takes to a rocket, and sprints back to the entrance, you know. Nothing drastic, nothing dramatic. It wasn't crazy. It was pretty basic stuff, honestly. But that's what happens when your MC is really strong from the beginning. So after that, you know, Izuku is basically told by the teachers before he even goes home that he's 100% in UA. And when he's gone home, he calls Bakugo and they talk and they're both like, yeah, we definitely got in, blah, blah, blah. He even tells Bakugo about how the teachers themselves told him he was in, and Bakugo was kind of jealous. But other than that, nothing really crazy happens over the next 2 weeks. All Might's been busy, so he hasn't been able to train Izuku and Bakugo, but they've been training with each other. In this timeline, Izuku gets the ball in the Quirk apprehension test, because things are basically the same as canon, honestly, so I'm just skipping to this Quirk apprehension test because I don't want to yap about all that. So at the Quirk apprehension test, Izuku gets thrown the ball, and he puts all, like, 100% one for all into it, and he throws it full force. And you just see his arm just get destroyed. And Aizawa's like, why would you do that? And Izuku's like, you said don't hold back, didn't you? He's like, if it's going to destroy your body, yes, hold back. Izuku's like, well, the thing is, a part of my quirk, you know, makes me very good at healing. So when Aizawa actually looks back down, Izuku's arm is just already entirely healed. You couldn't even tell it was damaged to begin with. And so Aizawa is just like mind-boggled. He's like, what? Excuse me? It says here his quirk is super strength, because during this 10-month time skip, I forgot to mention, All Might and Nezu had decided to hide the information about Izuku actually being immortal. So nobody knows it except for like All Might, Nezu, and like some very important figures. Outside of them, nobody really knows at this point. His classmates would know, but like they're not telling everybody and their mom, so it doesn't really matter. Fuck his old classmates, bro. Who cares? Anyways, so Aizawa's mind boggled, but he just moves on for now because he's like, I'll talk to the principal about this after. And yeah, it just continues on with the test. Bakugo in this timeline actually ends up getting 930 with his throw because he's been training for 10 months with All Might and Izuku. If he doesn't do like way better, there's bigger problems. I'm gonna be honest. But overall, Izuku gets first place, Bakugo gets second, and the rest, you know, just in a random order. I don't like Momo, I'm gonna be honest, so she gets like 12th, if it was by my opinion. Anyways, so after the Quirk apprehension test, Aizawa actually goes to the principal and asks him, he was like, I saw something very weird today. Izuku shattered his arm, and it just healed, and Nezu kind of just holds his head. He's like, oh my. And then he proceeds to explain to Aizawa that Izuku is actually immortal. He cannot die. Like, even if, like, he was basically nearly atomized, he still wouldn't die. You could set him on fire. You could destroy 99.9% of his body with a atomic atom destroyer or some shit. Izuku can heal from 0.1 of his body. Like, you would have to destroy everything of him if you want him to actually die. And Aizawa's like, really? What's his strength quirk? And Nezu's like, that I cannot tell you about, but yeah. So that's Izuku's real quirk, is immortality. And Aizawa's honestly kind of hyped about it. And since it's actually a mutation quirk, and Nezu actually explained to Aizawa that if he disabled Izuku's quirk, nothing would happen, and even if I did enable Aizawa to be able to turn off his quirk, it would make Izuku basically die on the spot. So either way, I'm not going to do this shit. So Izuku can then, you know, do basically his thing. His classmates were also confused about his whole arm fiasco, but they never really get a straight answer because Izuku was told not to tell anyone. And so Izuku kind of just keeps it to himself. Bakugo does as well, even though he does know the truth, obviously. And so they go home, and then the next day, they have the heroes versus villains training. And this time, it is exactly the same as canon. Izuku and Uraraka versus Bakugo and Ida. And so in this, Izuku and Bakugo have such a strong bond, and they have such a desire to fight each other because they're genuine rivals, even in spite of their friendship. Like, there's no sort of, like, dislike between the two. And so Izuku ends up looking at Uraraka and telling Uraraka to just head up the stairs. Him and Bakugo are going to duke it out. Izuku only toggles, like, 15% because if he hit, like, Bakugo with, like, 100% or, like, 90%, he would still kill Bakugo. But they've made an agreement where it's up to, like, whatever Izuku can do without any sort of drawback that counts for their, like, competitions and stuff. So Izuku will never go, like, 100%, even though he can heal it, against Bakugo. And Bakugo kind of fucks with this. So they kind of just both start off on the lighter side, Izuku using, like, 10% and Bakugo using, like, 17 to 20% of his power. And they just start duking it out, giant explosions. Izuku just, punching a wall, running through the wall so he gets out of the way, stuff like that. And they have a really fun fight, but in the end, it was not gonna happen where Bakugo would actually beat Izuku. It's just impossible because Izuku is immortal. And so Bakugo, knowing that obviously he can't actually defeat Izuku, is content with how that fight has gone. He's like, I did well, I'm content. And that's when Izuku just wraps the white ribbon around his arm. And Bakugo's considered out. He proceeds to then run upstairs and help out Uraraka, and they touch the bomb. Momo then tells everybody that Ida did the best in all of the heroes versus villains because he embraced what it was to be a villain. Izuku and Bakugo, they more had fun with the rivalry than paid attention to what they were actually supposed to be doing. And Uraraka didn't really do anything, unfortunately. And Uraraka kind of was hurt by this, but, like, it wasn't meant to be any sort of offensive towards Uraraka. Momo says that. It's like, I don't mean to, like, insult you or anything, but, like, you didn't really do anything. At least Ida embraced his role as a villain. But, like, you just kind of ran up a few stairs. I mean, that's all it was. And Uraraka would accept this, and she would, decide that she's going to train harder from now on. Anyways, that's the end of the heroes versus villains. They end up, going home with permission slips. They get it all signed, And then a week from then, they go to the USJ. And so when they're on the bus to USJ, everybody asks Izuku, like, how did his arm heal? And Izuku continues to just, kind of divert the subject, weaning around it, trying to avoid having to talk about it. And Aizawa is honestly kind of helping Izuku as well as Bakugo because obviously they all realize that this is a secret that people aren't really supposed to know. And so eventually they make it to the USJ, they go inside. 13 goes on that long ass rant that nobody cares about. And that's when Izuku notices in the middle of the field there's like a purple mist and villains coming out. And Kirishima notices it right after Izuku is just like, wait, you got us fake villains too? And Aizawa's like, no, those aren't fake, those are real. And from here on, things remain relatively canon, up until when the Nomu is actually about to attack Aizawa. Izuku manages to arrive in time to stop the Nomu from actually destroying Aizawa's face. And he used like 90% of One For All, like hurting his arm severely to catch the Nomu's arm, but it healed immediately, as you know. And that's when eventually Aizawa manages to get back up and handle the villains. And Aizawa, understanding that if Izuku's left to deal with the Nomu, even if he can't beat it, he can hold it off. Even though Aizawa doesn't like this fact and this idea of letting Izuku handle it, he has no real other choice. Otherwise, he might die and other students may once he dies. And that's a really iffy situation for Aizawa, so he opts to let Izuku fight the Nomu alone. And Izuku, he's having a rough time. He's getting the shit beat out of him. And eventually Izuku starts just using 100% of One For All. But he ends up letting up a little bit for 1 second. And that's when everybody notices the Nomu caught Izuku off guard. and is punching at full force. And unfortunately, this punch goes straight through Izuku's stomach. And everybody except, like, Bakugo is truly horrified. Because Aizawa knows Izuku is immortal, but, like, hasn't seen any sort of, like, injury that, like, had him, like, get used to it. And all the classmates didn't know this. So, like, most of the classmates just realized that Izuku, or like, Izuku's dead. He's done. And Izuku takes advantage of this. Even though he's, like, spitting up blood, he does take advantage of the fact that the Nomu just punched through his stomach to hold his fist there. And he just starts taking a beating. Now, I mean, he's taking a beating. Eventually, Aizawa manages to, disable a couple of the Nomu's quirks. And that's when Izuku manages to get his opportunity to get the Nomu out of him, pause, and start unleashing a barrage of 100% punches. Full force, beating the shit out of the Nomu, eventually sending it flying out of the USJ. And Shigaraki's like, what? How is he still alive? And Kurogiri, understanding that this is not a good situation they are currently in, before All Might even arrives, he takes Shigaraki and gets out of there. Because he understands that they're not going to win this fight. Not today. And so they end up leaving the USJ and returning to the bar. The heroes end up arriving, doing cleanup. His entire class now knows the truth, and they're told to make sure it stays secret. Of course, that doesn't remain, because obviously Aoyama snitches, but yeah. Anyways, so after the whole USJ incident, Izuku's just in the class, waiting for Aizawa. And while waiting, he decided to draw a little pet shark, Izuku then looks at us and says, have you guys ever wanted a cute-ass shark? Well, so do I. Wait, is this what they call foreshadowing? Aizawa then arrives in the classroom and informs the class that in 1 week, the UA Sports Festival will begin, and that they should all prepare themselves, etc., etc. And so, after the school day is over, Izuku then goes to Takoba Beach to train. He trains on that dirty-ass beach for the next week. During that week, though, you'll notice that Izuku is training really hard, and in the water, you just see a pair of eyes just looking slightly over the water, just staring. And eventually, there's one day, 5 days in, where Izuku actually collapsed from exhaustion. That's how hard he was training at the time. Like, he's honestly gotten his full cowling up to 60% in the span of a week from 45, bro. If that don't tell you he was going ham, that I don't know what will. Anyways, when he collapses, you'll notice a little shark walking up to him, biting his shirt and dragging him over to the gazebo. And he lays him inside the gazebo, and then he goes back to the water. And, 5 minutes later, Izuku kind of just, opens his eyes. He's like, huh? What happened? What? Where am I? I could have sworn I was on the beach. And then he notices he's in the gazebo. He's like, huh, that's weird. And then he just continues on with his day. He goes home, and he actually goes to sleep. And you just see the eyes in the water just go below the water as Izuku's walking away. So then we'll actually time skip to the day of the UA Sports Festival. And everybody, getting their fits on, relaxing all cool, shooting some b-ball outside the school with a couple of guys that were up to no good. Started causing trouble in my neighborhood. Got one little fight. My mom, I got scared and said, you move with your auntie and uncle and ballet. Then you see Izuku turn his head and go, shut the fuck up, Johan! Stop ruining the Fresh Prince theme song for me, man! And everybody's like, who's Johan? Who is he talking to? Yo, Izuku, man, I'm sorry, bro. Stop yelling at me, man, please. I'm sorry. And Izuku then decides he's going to ignore the narrator for the rest of the video. Everybody then leaves the locker room, kind of just staring at Izuku like he's a fucking weirdo. And they all just leave, go out to the main area. And that's when Izuku is actually called upon this time instead of Bakugo. And Izuku says, I have plot armor, you bitches! You ain't beating me! And everybody's like, the fuck is this kid on? What is he talking about? Is he delusional? Anyway, so Midnight then announces that the 3 things they are going to be doing are the obstacle course, the cavalry battle, and the 1v1s. And honestly, Izuku knows he's gonna cook the obstacle course, no diff. You know? He just runs it down. He's faster than Ida, he's faster than Bakugo, he's faster than Todoroki. He just runs it down. And as he's running through the exit, he looks at us and he says, I knew this shit was going to be canon. And everybody's just kind of in the audience is like, what is he talking about? Is he schizophrenic? Does he need mental help? What is wrong with this kid? And most of them are honestly kind of put off by the way Izuku randomly be talking to himself. And so, anyways, everybody else gets through the obstacle course. Same order, because there's no real difference. And so, after everybody gets through the cavalry battles, and honestly, the team here also remains canonical because most people think he's a weirdo and that he has a 10 million, so people are going to be going after them. So Tokiyami, who doesn't really care, would probably still go with Izuku. Uraraka probably wasn't going to abandon the guy. And Mei's crazy too. I mean, crazy with crazy equals crazy. And so they all team up, and honestly, it goes almost canonically, except this time when whoever it was tried to steal his headband, he actually managed to stop it. That's about the only difference. So he actually wins the cavalry battle. And so, then we move on to the Juan v Juans. And that is when the first matchup is like canon. It is Shinso versus Izuku Midoriya. And this battle, I'm gonna be so honest with you, I hate to say it, is canon, bro. Izuku gets caught in the mind control after answering one of Shinso's questions. And then Shinso tells him to walk off. One for All saves his whole fucking career. And he goes on to the next round. And the next round, Izuku, instead of actually trying to help Todoroki like he did in canon that way, he just taunts Todoroki. Todoroki keeps sending ice and Izuku just keeps destroying it all, you know. Bang here, destroyed. Get destroyed, punch. Just destroys all the ice. And Todoroki is actually starting to get annoyed. Because Izuku, while he's destroying it, he's just flipping around. He's like, guess who can't hit me? Who's a little shitter? You know, he's just having a blast with it. He's just like, you're so ass. Why can't you hit me, bro? Come on. Hit me just once, bro. He just keeps flipping around, you know, having fun. And eventually Izuku's like, this is getting a little boring. And then just speed blitzes Todoroki. Pushes him off the edge. And yeah, that was the end of that battle, you know? It wasn't very difficult for Izuku because he has full cowling at 60%. He's able to completely control it, basically. And so he just utterly destroys Todoroki. And the last match is Izuku and Bakugo. And in this timeline, they are actually kind of homies, you know? Bakugo didn't have any real disdain towards Izuku, especially since he thought his quirk was so cool. A dying factor, as I said in the part 1. He's got a dying factor, but that is cool as fuck. You gotta admit it. And so Bakugo and Izuku look at each other, and that's when they're like kind of walking in that old movie thing, where they're like slowly walking in a circle, kind of aura farming, you know, looking at each other, and then they just randomly start and they go to punch each other. And when Izuku goes to punch Bakugo, he actually explodes down, flips over Izuku's punch, and goes to kick Izuku in the head. When Izuku ducks and catches Bakugo's leg and throws him, Bakugo then catches himself using his explosions and decides to do a howitzer impact because he knows if he needs to get Izuku, he has to go all out from the start when Izuku is still toying with him. And so he goes for a straight howitzer impact. And honestly, Izuku was kind of caught by surprise by this, but he was able to react fast enough to actually manage to jump out of the way. And Bakugo then stops his impact, you know, exploding back towards Izuku to go and punch him. And Izuku, honestly, this time, uppercuts Bakugo, you know, catching him completely off guard. And Bakugo goes flying back, you know. Bakugo then catches himself, you know, he's just like, God damn it, how am I gonna get to him? So he ends up exploding the ground all over the place, creating rubble, trying to catch Izuku off guard, because Bakugo can stay in the air with his explosions, right? And so he's trying to like bait Izuku around, trying to get him to trip up in something. And that's when Izuku, jumps over towards Bakugo. And Bakugo is just like, God damn it. And he lets out a giant explosion in front of him. And Izuku gets pushed down to the ground. I'm going into way too much detail about this fight, goddamn. Izuku gets pushed down into the arena ground. And he gets back up. And Bakugo is like, I'm never going to get him out of the arena at this rate. And so Bakugo decides he's going to have to try for another howitzer impact. And this time around, when he goes for it, Izuku actually manages to punch Bakugo in the stomach in the middle of his howitzer impact. He dodges it and uppercuts him into his stomach. And that's when Izuku actually grabs Bakugo, who's completely winded in the moment, and throws him outside the arena with 40% of One For All, winning the fight in the end. And after he wins the fight, him and Bakugo actually shake hands and was like, good match. And Bakugo knew that he wasn't actually ever going to be able to beat Izuku properly. And he's kind of sad that his strategy did not work against Izuku. But he's proud that he managed to stay in, even though it didn't, for as long as he did. That was a good 2-3 minute match, which is not bad for a couple of kids in UA. And so Bakugo then tells Izuku that he had fun. It was a fun match. And that's when they're all brought up to a podium, Izuku, Bakugo, and Tokiyami. Izuku in first place, Bakugo in second, and Tokiyami in third. And so after all that, we will skip back to the classroom. And in the classroom, that's when Aizawa was telling them all, oh, you all got little booklets and stuff of all the internship offers you got. You'll notice that Izuku actually only got one page of offers, because most of the heroes and stuff were like, this kid's really weird. Is he insane? Does he have some sort of genuine mental problems and stuff like that? And that's when he'll look at his list and he'll notice two names specifically. He will notice Mirako, who thinks he'd be a fun toy to play with, basically. And he will notice Snipe. And Izuku, thinking that Snipe is actually a really cool hero due to guns. I mean, that's all you need to hear. Guns. And Izuku's like, damn, that's cool. I'm going with him. And so Izuku ends up choosing to go internship with Snipe. Don't know why I said it like that. Izuku then goes to Snipe's agency, and Snipe actually just talks with Izuku. He's just like, I didn't actually expect you to come to me. And Izuku's just like, well, it was really between you and Mirako. I didn't get many offers. It's like, but you won. He's like, everybody thinks I'm crazy. I might be, but everybody thinks it, so. And so Snipe is like, uh-huh. And Izuku is like, wait, if I'm interning with you, does that mean I can actually start using guns? And Snipe is like, yeah, I'll be teaching you how to use guns, because I think it could be a nice asset to your own fighting style. Especially since I know several things about your quirk that, outsiders aren't really allowed to know. Like, for example, your immortality and stuff like that. Maybe, shooting some people would be a little bit easier, though you never want to shoot them fatally. And Izuku is, pretending to listen while he's just thinking, damn, I could have 2, gold guns, bro? This could be just like Call of Duty! Let's go! And so Izuku practices his accuracy for the next couple days when the internships are actually cut short. And the reason they are actually cut short is due to the death of a classmate, that being Tenya Ida. Because in this timeline, Izuku doesn't go to Hosu for any sort of reason, because he's just training with targets with Snipe. And honestly, the entire class is saddened by this information. But they use it as fuel to fuel themselves. They're like, this is all the more reason to be a hero, so we can protect our fellow classmates and stuff like that. And honestly, the entire class is more, more invested than ever after Ida's death. And the sad mood has now kind of transformed into determination over sadness. Of course, there will always be that kind of tinge, but they're really determined now due to the whole scenario. Except for the little bitch Mineta. He just gives up like a little cocksucker. And so after Mineta ends up leaving the hero school because he's a little pussy ass bitch, and then we're down to like a good number of students, right? The final exams didn't happen, and honestly, I'ma be that guy. Canon. I mean, the exact same as Canon, because Izuku still can't use all of One for All, and even though All Might is injured, he's still using 100% of it, so his physical strength, his speed, everything does still outclass Izuku. And Izuku could destroy his body, but no, I'm not doing that this time. I'm gonna be so honest. He still doesn't like pain, so he's not gonna go out of his way to destroy his body if it's not like truly life or death. And honestly, the teachers kind of understand that. Because, like, he might be immortal, but he could still feel pain. Like, who wants to feel pain? And so, after the exams, that are completely canon, we go to forced training. That's also relatively canon up until... Honestly, it's canon up until the attack. There's nothing that really changes. The only thing about Izuku that's really different in this timeline is he's a lot more jovial. He's more childish, sarcastic, happy in this timeline than he was in canon. He's a little less strategic because he has the room to not be due to, immortal. And so he's not like 100%, strategic like canon Izuku, but he's still really smart, regardless of how jovial he is. And so, on the third night of the forest training camp, he notices blue flames going up, and so he goes up to where Koda is, and he sees Koda about to be attacked, and that's when Izuku immediately throws himself, moving Koda out of the way, and getting punched himself, taking the punch full force. In this timeline, the reason he actually gets hit, unlike Midoriya in the main timeline, is because he's also a little less calm and collected. So he actually kind of panicked in the moment. So he just pushed Koda out of the way so Koda didn't get hit by it. And Izuku just tanked the hit full force. And so Izuku then, gets up healing. And he moves Koda out of the way. He runs away with Koda, puts him down really quickly in a corner somewhere. And he goes to fight Muscular because he's like, I can't let this kid get hurt. And honestly, I'm gonna be that guy. Muscular doesn't stand a fucking chance, bro. After Izuku at 60% isn't doing enough damage, Izuku is just like, I have to be able to do enough damage, and he just goes up to 100% because he knows he can heal it if he really needs to. So he just beats the shit out of Muscular, knocking him out. And that's when he goes over to the corner, gets Koda, and brings him over to Aizawa. And this is where things kind of get different. Izuku starts running around trying to help everybody. But in the midst of trying to help everybody, that's when he doesn't realize that he has to help himself. And Mr. Compress manages to touch Izuku on the back, turning him into a little marble. And that's when you'll realize that both Izuku and Bakugo have been captured. And so afterwards, they're running towards the portal, and most of the Class 1A is trying to catch up to them, get them back. And they come up with a similar plan as in canon, without Izuku in this timeline, of course. But before they can get there, Mr. Compress throws Bakugo's ball at them to distract them for another minute. And that's when Izuku is found to have been captured and is in the bar of the League of Villains. And the reason the League of Villains went after Izuku in this timeline is purely because they think he's insane. He talks to himself. They don't think he's 100% heroic, which I made him like that. He isn't 100% heroic. And so he's kind of just caught off guard by Mr. Compress, and they brought him over there because he's insane, blah, blah, blah. And so the League of Villains then spend the next few hours trying to convince Izuku to join them. And instead of actually even answering yes or no, he's just making fun of them the entire time. He's just taking the piss the entire fucking time they're trying to convince them. He's like calling Shigaraki dried up and shriveled. Who is he? His dead grandmother and stuff like that, you know? He's asking Dobby if he's Two-Face from DC Comics because he's just as ugly, you know? And he's just kind of taking the piss. And he actually kind of looks at Toga. He's like, in his head, he's just like, man, she a baddie, bro. I kind of want to hit, bro. And that's when Izuku is just like, fuck it. I'll join, bro. I'll join. As long as I can go on a date with Toga, bro. And the League of Villains is like, huh? He's like, you gotta do everything for the hose. Bro, who don't like a good-ass yandere? Izuku then says to the League of Villains that Toga honestly kind of finds some fun. And then she's like, I'll go on a date! Just waving her hand like a crackhead for some reason. And that's when the League of Villains hideout is attacked. You know, everybody is basically kidnapped by All For One again, saved from the whole endeavor. And then Izuku is there at the place where All For One had beat the shit out of like half the heroes. You know, Best Jeanist, Mount Lady, stuff like that. And so when the League of Villains all arrive, that's when All For One is like, this is not a good situation. And he realizes Kurogiri is actually knocked out. And so he doesn't end up teleporting them yet, like in canon. You know, All Might gets there first, blah, blah, blah. They're trying to keep Izuku. And that's when All For One tries to toggle Kurogiri's quirk. And so after he activates Kurogiri's quirk and that one polarity guy, most of the people are going through the portal, including Toga. And Izuku, he's able to resist it if he really wanted to, but then he kind of looks back and forth. He's just like, yandere baddie or hero school? Yandere baddie or hero school? Well, guys, I know you guys came to save me, but you gotta do what you gotta do for the hoes, bro. I'm sorry. You just see him just get dragged through the portal because he just let himself. And All For One, even, like, everybody's just standing there, jaw dropped, and they're just like, did he really just let himself go through the portal because he thinks the girl is cute? And then you just see his dad, you know, that's my boy! That's my boy! Watching it on TV. And, like, again, everybody's just standing there, jaw just completely dropped. Like, huh? Even his mother is like, oh my god. And face palms because she's just like, he's been like this for too long. And so, after they get teleported away, Izuku actually ends up getting trained by Toga in knives. All Might versus All For One, same thing that happened in canon. All Might does win, barely. And so, Izuku, you know, is training with knives with Toga. So instead of using katanas like actual Deadpool, he actually decides to use daggers. So his weapons are fist, daggers, 2 Glock 19s. Alright? And so he doesn't actually properly join the League of Villains. You know, he's only there because of Toga. And so his agreement with them is basically he just doesn't get in their way. And they're good to do whatever the fuck they want. None of his business as long as he gets to rizz up Toga, bro. And so, him and Toga go back to training. And during this training, the League of Villains then actually breaks out All For One. And All For One is thinking, okay, it still shouldn't have been quite long enough for Izuku to completely merge with All For One. So I could still steal his immortality quirk. And then I would be undefeatable. And so he then sends Lady Nagant after Izuku, and he ends up giving her the quirk and everything, and she pulls up on Izuku, shooting him in the leg. Izuku then just kind of stands back up and is just like, damn, bro, what was that for? Pulls out his own sniper, and they just start shooting at each other. Izuku then just decides, I'm gonna actually try and hit a shot. So he takes a bullet through the heart, and Izuku is just like, it's whatever, and proceeds to aim intently and then shoot Lady Nagant through the bottom of her stomach, piercing her spleen and her spine, completely crippling her and leaving her to bleed out. The reason Izuku is actually used to pain now is because during that training arc, he got used to being stabbed a lot because Toga wanted to drink his blood, you know, because Toga was training with him, stuff like that. So he got used to pain a lot more than he had been prior, and so he got used to it, and so getting shot through the heart and stuff didn't actually bug him a lot. And so after that, after Izuku ends up like defeating Lady Nagant, that's when Izuku has his back turned and All For One stabs Izuku through the back with like a spiked arm, and he just stabs Izuku straight through the back. And he's trying to take Izuku's quirk, and before he can, you hear Izuku go, "I was prepared for it this time," getting stabbed through the back or stomach. That's why I named it Rengoku style. Donut slash. And he does absolutely nothing to All For One. And then Izuku's just like, "Oh no. Johan, help me, man. I'm sorry. I promise to never ignore you again. Please. Please." I don't know, Izuku. I don't know if I should help you after you just ignored me the last 20 minutes, bro. I don't know. And Izuku is just like, "I'll do anything. I'm sorry." And then you proceed to see a little blue shark drop from the sky and bite All For One's head off.
That's all, folks.